Hey friends, welcome back to my kitchen. Today I have decided to make a treat. My youngest two had a half day at school and I have not made homemade Boston cream donuts in I think almost 10 years. My two youngest have no memory of me ever making them before. So I think it might have been before they were old enough to eat them. So I'm going to share the process with you. It's actually not very complicated. Right here, I am whisking together milk, cream, and egg yolks, and I will link the recipe that I used below. It is not my recipe. Now I am combining sugar, salt, and cornstarch in my little saucepan, and I'm going to mix those things together before slowly adding the milk and egg yolk mixture. You don't want any lumps. This is the first step. I am making the pastry cream that is basically the custard filling. I actually didn't love this filling as much as I loved other custards that I've used in the past, so I don't think I would use this one. If you decide to get brave and make this recipe, I would look up a different homemade custard. This one basically tasted like homemade vanilla pudding, and I just felt like it was lacking something compared to like a really good store-bought Boston cream donut. So anyways, all you do is heat this over medium heat. You're going to stir it almost constantly. Here I made a little bit of a mess and my stovetop was super clean. So I was like, I'm not baking this onto my stovetop. So I lifted up the grate and cleaned up my mess. But now I'm just going to whisk it constantly over medium heat. Looking back, I kind of wish I had stuck with medium low because look how thick it got. I ended up adding probably close to a cup of milk after I had mixed in all of the butter. You mix in slowly a few tablespoons of butter, and then you add your vanilla. And that does help to smooth it out some, but I ended up adding close to a cup of milk in order to get a more pliable custard that I could stick in a piping bag, or in my case, a sandwich bag, and use to fill the donuts. This was way too thick. The reason you are making your pastry cream first is because it needs to go in the fridge to cool for probably a couple of hours before you actually use it to fill your donuts. But I would say it's totally fine if you get it down to at least room temperature before filling your donuts. Otherwise, too much of it is going to want to absorb into your warm donut. So here I'm just covering it. I transferred it to a bowl and I stuck it in the freezer for a little while first and then transferred it to the fridge. Now I am making the batter or the dough for our donut, and it's just flour, sugar, yeast, a little salt, very similar to if you were making homemade cinnamon rolls or any kind of sweet dough. Mix that together, and I'm also going to add warm milk and melted butter. I heard someone say recently with regards to treats and dessert that she had decided nothing was off limits if she made it herself from scratch. First off, it takes away that instant gratification. You're not making anything from scratch super fast. Also, you know the ingredients that are going in it. So you are, particularly in a treat like Boston cream donuts, something that is going to be fried, I can choose a healthier oil. Also, by the time you see the end of this video, you'll realize that these Boston cream donuts have like 7 ingredients total, maybe less than that. It may be more like 5 or 6. And for me and my house, it is farm fresh butter, raw milk, farm fresh eggs, organic sugar. It's not bad stuff. And I chose to use avocado oil in my smallest cast iron skillet because when you are frying with healthier oils, it is expensive. So I definitely tried to be as economical as possible. Another great example of turning a notoriously unhealthy, pretty bad for you food into a healthier from scratch meal would be something like sweet and sour chicken and veggie fried rice. You are frying in a healthier oil, you've got lots of veggies, you can pick clean chicken, and of course you're not going to be consuming any MSGs. Now it is time to transfer our dough to an oiled or greased bowl, preferably oven safe. I am going to stick mine in the bottom oven on the bread proof setting until it has doubled in size. While I was waiting for my dough to rise, I headed out to the greenhouse, and the first thing I did was take a picture of these tomato trays. I had up potted these last week, and I just about forgot which was which, and I hate it when that happens because I would love to save seed every year, and it's also really helpful to know which of my tomatoes did really well and which didn't. This picture will be my guide. Unfortunately, I had a very limited number of plant markers this year, so this was just an easy way to mark these tomatoes. As long as no one moves them in the greenhouse, then I would be in big trouble. I started all of these seeds probably 4 weeks ago at this point, and I suppose I could have left them in the seed starting trays that I started them in, but it's really important if you want strong seedlings to up pot them to larger containers and begin watering from the bottom as soon as they sprout. This encourages deep, strong roots. It forces the plants to put roots out and grow downward nice and deep to seek out the water and the fertilizer or whatever you're using. All of these containers that I'm using, I have had for years. These 6-cell trays that you can see up against the side of the greenhouse are ones that I've just hung on to as I've purchased things from nurseries and local feed stores over the years. I hang on to all of my pots. I have a variety of sizes. Sometimes in the fall and winter, I actually grow my winter crops in 1, 2, and 3 gallon containers that I've just saved over the years, and I grow them in my greenhouse all winter long. I still have a few weeks before I plant these out in the garden, and many of my seed trays, I start more than one seed in each cell just to test for germination, and if all of them germinate, then I can simply tease the roots apart when I am up potting them like a day like today. I have never had any trouble. I've heard that pepper seedlings can be awfully sensitive and temperamental and don't necessarily like being teased apart, but I have never had any issues with that. And just about every one of my pepper seed cells have more than one. Some of them have 3 seedlings that came up in each cell, which is wonderful. I actually have a friend that I'm going to be passing along my extra seedlings to. Our chickens have been scratching around and using our fenced-in garden area, which is about 2,000 square feet, all through the winter. We will probably move them back over to their regular fenced-in chicken run next weekend so we can start to prep the garden for planting, but I am really hopeful that having them in there for about the last 2 months, hopefully they have been able to take care of quite a lot of the pests that tend to overwinter in your soil and in your mulch. I usually count on the Farmer's Almanac to give me the best, most accurate date for our average last frost each year. It does vary from year to year, but as most of you probably know, our climate is in cycles. It's all cyclical. So we tend to have, I'm sure the date for our last frost this year coincides with similar dates when we have also been in an El Nino pattern, which is what we've been in this year. This year, the Farmer's Almanac says our last average frost would be March 22nd. Well, March 22nd is already within view in our 15-day forecast, and we don't have anything colder than about 38 degrees at night. So even though I will probably bring quite a few of these seedlings in on nights when it's going to get down in the 30s and 40s, as of right now, we don't have any more frosts or hard freezes for sure in the near future. So I am excited to get the garden going. Now my dough has risen. I love it when the plastic wrap forms this massive dome from all the built up air inside. The dough is super soft and not sticky at all. It has risen wonderfully. Now all that is required is that you pat it out to about 3/4 of an inch thick. I kind of learned the hard way that a few of my donuts that I made toward the end of punching these out were too thick, and they ended up just the slightest bit doughy inside. Now it says to use a biscuit cutter. I don't use biscuit cutters because I have an endless supply of rings for my mason jars, so I use a wide mouth ring. Looking back, it would actually be a great idea to use a regular mouth ring to make smaller portion controlled donuts. And also I think they would have fried slightly more evenly. So I think I might do that next time. I don't know when that will be because this was a bit of a task, but it was fun and absolutely delicious. A very unusual Friday treat for my family. Now, this is where I was pressing down my leftover dough and just punching out whatever was left. And some of these ended up quite thick. And these ended up being a little overdone because of how thick they were when I let them rise again and got them ready for the grease. They were just too big. They were darkening in the oil faster than they were cooking on the inside. So just keep that in mind when you are frying dough of any kind. Smaller is better. Now this tray will go back into the oven to rise for, I think I did about 30 minutes. This was the final outcome. They look beautiful. They are pillowy soft. I let my oil heat up in the last 10 minutes or so of the rising, and I simply fried one at a time, being very careful to monitor the temperature of my oil. And you have to, it's such a sweet spot between making sure they don't get too dark, but also making sure the inside is fully cooked. It's definitely an art that I don't plan to practice too often. If the process for Boston cream donuts seems a little too intimidating, I would suggest that you start with beignets. Beignets are just a simple fried pastry dough that you toss in sugar, powdered sugar. Really, there are a lot of options. Cinnamon sugar would be nice. And it is the same or similar process, but very simple. You're not filling anything. You're not making any sort of glaze. It's really great. My kids love it when I occasionally make those. Now they are finished. You can see which ones spent a little too much time in the hot oil. Once they have cooled for just a few minutes, you are going to use a knife to poke a hole about 3/4 of the way through, and I actually rock it back and forth a little to make a bigger pocket for the custard or pastry cream. The glaze for this recipe just calls for melting chocolate chips with heavy cream in the microwave. I did not love the outcome. It was somewhat smooth, but extremely thin. So I think I'll choose a different chocolate glaze next time I make these. Now you can see that I put my pastry cream in a sandwich bag. I will say freezer bags tend to be much sturdier and they're easier to kind of poke inside your little hole. But so many of the freezer bags now have like an envelope fold at the bottom, and so you can't get a nice crisp corner. Of course, if you're fancy, you may have a piping bag, but I am not. I ended up using the spoon to drizzle more glaze over the top of these since this glaze was so thin. It didn't give a nice chocolate top like you would get from a donut shop. So again, I won't be using this method of glaze again. It also never really quite set up so that you wouldn't get chocolate all over your fingers when you pick it up. So it was messy to eat them, but oh goodness, it was still so good. I would love to hear in the comments if you have ever made homemade donuts, particularly any that require filling. I look forward to making these again, but I'll definitely try a different recipe since I didn't love the pastry cream and I definitely didn't love the glaze, but the outcome was still quite satisfying. Thank you for hanging out with me on this rather odd, productive day inside and out. I hope you have a wonderful weekend, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks for watching.